everybody, it's Lori. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my October wrap-up. I'm going to go over all of the books that I read this month and I'm going to tell you guys what I thought of them. I also wanted to mention that a lot of the books I read this month are spooky scary books because I'm definitely a mood reader or like a seasonal reader. So because Halloween, October spookiness, I wanted to read spooky scary books. So without further ado, let's just get into the books. The first book that I read this month was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. This book is essentially about a boy named Jacob who has a really interesting grandfather. Grandfather talks about this home that he used to live in and these children that have interesting abilities. So after something mysterious happens to Jacob's grandfather, Jacob goes on an adventure to figure out said mystery. I give this book a 4 out of 5. I kind of wanted to read it because I thought it was going to be spooky, but it ended up surprising me because it really wasn't as spooky as I was expecting it to be. Next book I read this month was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This book is about a little boy who is confronted by a monster. There's not really much I can say about this book without giving too much away. So I'm just going to say that once again, I thought this was going to be a spooky, scary story that was going to freak me out, but I ended up being completely wrong about this one. It was really good. I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. It was incredible. Like, I just loved this book. By the way, after I read A Monster Calls and Miss Peregrine, I actually watched both of these movies because both of these have film adaptations. This film adaptation I was not a huge fan of, but this one was fantastic. I loved it. The next book that I read this month was The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. This is an adult fiction that really took me by surprise. This is actually probably one of my favorite reads of the month. It's actually a unique story that has a whole bunch of fairy tale retellings within the story. It's about a boy named David who goes through a lot of family changes. His mother passes away and his father remarries, and he's just kind of struggling coping with these family changes. So he turns to his books, which he loves very dearly. And something traumatic happens and he's whisked into this fairy tale world. I'm actually really surprised that more people haven't actually read this book because I haven't really heard much about it, but this book is amazing. If you love fairy tales or just like love retellings, dark fairy tales especially, these are some really dark fairy tales. I highly recommend this. It's amazing. I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month, which I don't have a physical copy of, Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. We have our character Audrey Rose, who is kind of obsessed with forensics. She's an apprentice to her uncle who teaches her all about forensics. They get some victims that all have the same injuries in common. Audrey Rose gets really engrossed in figuring out who committed these crimes. Stalking Jack the Ripper, I honestly whizzed through that book. I probably read it in less than 24 hours. It was so good. I love the interaction between the characters, especially Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell. Thomas Cresswell is amazing. Give Stalking Jack the Ripper a 5 out of 5. The next book that I read this month was Hunting Prince Dracula by Kerri Maniscalco. I actually have a physical copy of this one. I need to get a physical copy of Stalking Jack the Ripper, but I read that one on my e-reader. So I can't go into too many details about this book as it is the sequel of Stalking Jack the Ripper, but to say a little bit about it, it is basically the continuation of the story of Audrey Rose. She's still obviously really into forensics, but she's trying to get through things that happened after what happened in Stalking Jack the Ripper. But this was also fantastic, and it was probably even better than the first book. I give Hunting Prince Dracula a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was You by Caroline Kepnes. This was another book that I absolutely flew through. This was so good, and I don't know if that's weird to say that considering what this is about. I really enjoyed the psychological adventure that I went on, that went on in my mind while reading this. So this is actually about a stalker, and you are in the mind of Joe Goldberg, who is stalking Guinevere Beck. The writing in this is fantastic. You go through points where you actually start feeling sorry for Joe and feeling disconnected from the characters that he is stalking. I felt really bad for him, and I didn't know how to feel. Like I'd catch myself feeling bad for Joe and then being like, whoa, wait a minute. No, he's a stalker. He's a bad guy. Calm down, Lori. Why are you feeling bad about the bad guy? But this was fantastic. This adult novel, I honestly recommend if you are interested in going through a psychological adventure in your mind and just experiencing some really, really good writing. I give You by Caroline Kepnes 5 out of 5 stars. Next 3 books that I read this month were for the Dewey's 24-hour readathon. So the first book that I read for the Dewey's 24-hour readathon was We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. I'm going to put my readathon vlog in the cards somewhere over here. You know, I mentioned my vlog that I liked it. After sitting and like thinking about it, I didn't actually like this book as much as I thought I did. So this book is about our main character, Marin, who is in college and she's kind of going through some kind of tragedy, or she's already been through a tragedy and she's kind of figuring out how to deal with it. She gets a visit from her best friend and she is kind of trying to open up to her friend and deal with what has happened in her life. I was really hoping that this would be a favorite for the year. I didn't actually find myself liking it as much as I was hoping I would. Don't get me wrong though, I did like it, just not as much as I kind of portrayed in my vlog. I give We Are Okay 3 out of 5 stars. Second book that I read for Dewey's 24-hour readathon was The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. This is a book of short stories, basically fairy tales, dark fairy tales set in the Grishaverse. Stories in this book were amazing. I love dark fairy tales, as I've mentioned, probably in this video and like several other videos I've done, but I really love them, and this had just so many of them. This also had really unique illustrations that just made the experience of reading the stories even better because they were so beautiful and they just worked really, really well with the stories. I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read for Dewey's 24-hour readathon and the last book that I read this month was Monstrous Volume 1 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This is a really, really cool graphic novel that has like steampunk elements and Asian elements. It takes place after an apocalyptic war and you're following the character of Micah Half-Wolf. The main character is also kind of going through something that I don't want to really mention because it is kind of spoilers, but it is definitely an internal battle for the main character, which I really, really love. This was an absolutely amazing graphic novel and I'm really hoping to continue it really, really soon because I loved it so much. I give Monstrous Volume 1 a 5 out of 5 stars. So those were all the books that I read this month. I did really well for reading this month. I'm actually really proud of myself. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to give it a legendary thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. I post videos every Tuesday and sometimes Friday. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Bye!